In this module, I'm going to discuss radio and television advertising. In a previous module, I discussed print advertising, specifically that of newspaper and magazine. Now, the information about radio and TV advertising, as well as the information about print advertising, can be found in various chapters of your textbook. I want you to remember that this video is no substitute for reading the textbook. I like to highlight certain things and hopefully supplement the information, but ultimately you're responsible for reading the book and making sure you understand the information. So let's start by looking at radio advertising. One of the first things to think about with radio advertising is how it is everywhere. We play radio in our cars, it's in stores, it's in office buildings, we play it at home, it can be in the waiting room of the doctor's office, and many other places. Now, that doesn't mean that every time the radio is playing that we're listening to it. In fact, a lot of people use radio as more of a background noise. But the point is, the reach is everywhere, and used effectively, that can bode very well for marketers. Some people think that radio ads can't really be very creative. That's because they're really very one-dimensional. All you have is sound. Other forms of advertising, television advertising for example, you can combine sight and sound. Or sometimes with print advertising, you can combine the visual with the sometimes scents, or sometimes I mentioned Welch's grape jelly ad where they were experimenting with taste on an ad. With radio, all you have is sound. But with the right approach and the right creativity, good things can happen. Included with this module are some sample radio commercials. These are award-winning radio ads. I'd like you to play them. Let's look at the advantages of radio advertising. Radio ads can be very quickly produced. If I have something I need to advertise immediately, it's very likely I can go to a radio station and literally within hours the ad could begin airing. You see companies do this especially when there are natural disasters or other things occurring in communities. For example, when a tornado comes through a community and causes great damage, insurance companies immediately begin advertising 800 numbers or providing information about claims and things like that. Other forms of advertising, as we have discussed, can't happen so quickly. Another advantage is it's really hard to skip the ad. With a newspaper or magazine, you can simply skip past the page where the ads are or not notice it. Or with television ads, if you're recording the program and watching it later, you can skip through the ads. But with radio, it's really hard to do that. Again, it doesn't mean that you're listening to the ads, but your ability to skip through them is very limited. Radio contains very specialized formats. Think of the variety of different radio stations that marketers have available. There are stations dedicated to sports, to talk, to all genres of music, and many other things. If you know the type of radio programming your target audience listens to, it's usually very easy to target the radio ads for that audience. And there's also local and national adaptability. I worked for a large financial services organization, and one of the things that we always did was create national radio commercials, but we left space for local offices to customize them with their information. In other words, they would take the commercials to their local radio station, and the radio station could drop in names, contact information, phone numbers, websites, and things of that nature. So it worked really well for the local offices in this situation. Of course, there are some disadvantages. The big one is that ads are really just background noise. When you listen to the radio, do you really listen to the ads? Sometimes you do, and those that you do listen to are probably those that stand out because of their creativity, as we have discussed. But again, for a lot of people, it's just background noise. The messages are also fleeting. That means that once the ad runs, it's gone. Unlike a printed ad, which perhaps a person could read through a newspaper or a magazine repeatedly and have many chances of being exposed to the ad. With a radio ad, once it runs, it's gone. Now that doesn't mean that marketers don't run the ad multiple times, because again, frequency is important, but for any given ad, the message is very fleeting. And as we've already discussed, there's a lot of clutter with radio advertising. A lot of radio formats are to play blocks of music with blocks of commercials. And when you have 5 or 10 minutes worth of commercials running back to back, it becomes very cluttered and very hard for any particular ad to stand out. Now let's touch base on television advertising. Traditionally, television advertising is to inform, to build images, and to convince someone to purchase a product or a service. But there's also interactive and direct response advertising that can work quite well in television. Think of infomercials, where you're asked to call a number or visit a website immediately for a limited time. Those can be very effective as well. There are different types of programming that advertising can be purchased on. So let's look at those now. There's network programming. Network programming is where you have a national organization, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox. Those organizations operate almost like franchises, in that local affiliates become a part of the larger network. Think of the local TV stations in your city and how oftentimes they're affiliated with the network that provides programming and other things. Now there's spot TV. Spot TV is when there's the opportunity to insert local ads into national programming. So even big high-profile events with a lot of national ads, think of the Super Bowl, for example, they always leave spots for local stations to sell advertising on their own and put it into the programming. This is important to the affiliates because this is how they make their money. There's cable or satellite dish programming. Now the interesting thing with cable or satellite is that it's not just the advertisers who are paying to run the ads, but it's the viewers who are subscribing to the service who are essentially paying to view it. That can be very profitable for the cable companies. The other thing that cable gives you, though, cable and satellite, is very selective targeting. Many cable or dish systems have perhaps 150 or 200 or more different channels. There's channels devoted to cooking, or to certain sports, or to life, or to animals, or to news, or to weather. Again, if you know the type of programming that your audience watches, it can be very effective to have a very specific targeting strategy for them. There's also syndicated programming. Syndicated programming is where you have independent programs that are shown on local stations. They're often national programs, but they're not shown at a national time. An example would be game shows, perhaps. Wheel of Fortune being one of them. Wheel of Fortune is a program that's available all over the United States, but it doesn't really appear on a specific network. It appears on as independent programs on local stations. Another example of this would be things like Oprah or Dr. Phil or programs like that. Or oftentimes it's runs, like MASH or Frasier or other such programs. And then there's public television. Public television really provides little opportunity for traditional advertising, but it provides opportunities for sponsorships. Public television is usually funded by a combination of money from the state and local governments, and also from the viewers who participate by sending in contributions and things of that nature. However, there are opportunities to sponsor various programs. So what are the advantages of television advertising? Well, one of the big advantages is audience size. Where else are you going to go in most markets where you can reach literally millions of people with one type of programming? There's also the high impact. You have sight plus sound plus motion. So unlike, for example, radio advertising or newspaper advertising, where we've said it's pretty one-dimensional, you have all these various things that are available. There's also the opportunity for very diverse programming, especially as you get into certain cable and satellite programs. Again, there's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of programming choices for which you can target your ads. The big disadvantage, it's cost. Television advertising can be very expensive. Now, you get what you pay for. I used to have branch managers around the country come and talk to me about opportunities that they had to advertise in their local market. They would often tell me things like they could get 50 commercials, 50 30-second television commercials for $1,000 or something like that, which sounds like it's very reasonable. But if you look at the programming, if you look at when those commercials air and things, you realize that you really do get what you pay for. There's also the clutter, like radio. How many of us really pay attention to all of the television ads that we see? And like radio, there is the chance for fleeting messages. Unless you record the program, once the ad airs, it is gone. Now again, I want to emphasize in broadcast advertising, in radio and television, and in other forms as well, it's frequency which is really key. You very seldom just run one or a handful of ads. If I ask you to think of ads that you have seen before, they're usually ones that you have seen over and over and over, and that's why you remember them. That's all I have on this topic. This was a short module, but again, you must read the information that's in the book. Thank you.